Hi everyone, this is Elias Martin from CollectingJapanesePrints.com, welcoming you to Woodblock Wednesday, where every Wednesday we get together to discuss Japanese prints, paintings, and history. So I just want to start off today's Woodblock Wednesday with basically it's become sort of a weekly reminder. While we're all in quarantine now, I want to encourage all of you that are in cities in parts of the world where this is happening, and I imagine that's pretty much everywhere, to stay home if you don't need to go out and to just basically use the time wisely. But please, going outside and the more that you go outside, the more that you sort of come in contact with other people puts yourself at risk as well as others. So just want to remind all of you of that. And today's Woodblock Wednesday is inspired by some questions that I received from some collectors and some clients. And so, I thought, well, I'll address some of the questions that I received in this video. And then I will also, we'll talk about one particular print. Lately, I've been on a 20th century kick on these Woodblock Wednesday videos, and so today we're going to discuss an ukiyo-e print that is on my website. It's a fantastic print which deserves some attention. But before we get to that point, so I just wanted to discuss some questions that relate to tips on collecting. And so the first question, I received a question about where collectors should buy their artwork. And that's kind of a tricky question. The easiest answer is obviously from reputable dealers like myself and others in the industry. You could easily identify them. They're part of the Ukiyo-e Dealers Association of Japan or other important organizations that vet dealers for their business practices and of course vouch for the quality of the artwork that they sell. So, but having that, setting that aside for a second, and there's other dealers that I buy from that are not part of those organizations. So it's just a matter of sharpening your eye, so to be able to identify those dealers that offer the work that you might be interested in. But another place where you could source material are auction houses. And auction houses for collectors offer a lot of opportunities. It's a place where you might be able to discover fresh material that just comes out from an estate, and you're able to possibly buy artwork at a wholesale or below retail price. But, and there's a big but here, auction houses also represent a lot of pitfalls and landmines. And maybe I'm going to reveal a little bit of some secrets of the industry, but most general auction houses, even Christie's and Sotheby's, but when I say auction houses, I just mean auction houses that auction off all kinds of things. I'll deal with the online auctions that specialize in Japanese prints in a moment. But these general these general auction houses that just sell things. So regionally, there's smaller ones. I live in Chicago, so there's a couple here, and then there's the larger ones that are national, and then there's international ones. And so basically, when an auction house has a work of art that you're interested in, I recommend to ask as many questions as possible. So most of the time they have a specialist, especially if it's a larger auction house. And so you can address very specific questions. You can ask questions about condition. You can ask questions. Let's say, for example, print is framed. And a lot of the times you see prints at auction, they are framed because they've just been taken off the walls from a collector's home and put up for sale. And so what you should ask is what condition the print is in. And if the print is framed, request that it be unframed. Really good auction houses are used to these kind of questions, and they do this. they'll do it for you. They'll open up the frame, take pictures of the print, and then you'll be able to see the condition. Now, if the print is glued down, obviously they're not going to be able to show you the print outside of the mat if the mat is attached to the print in any way. But that's useful information. You may not want to bid on a print that's been glued down or taped down. And that's the whole point. If the print comes apart from the mat easily, then you know, oh, okay, well, the condition shouldn't be too bad. And you could see, if the print has margins, if the print has tape residue or tape on it, you could see all kinds of things. You could also see if there's foxing, mold stains. If the mat is covering the image, you might be able to see a matte line, and also you might be able to see some color loss where the print is lighter in the middle where it's exposed to the light, and the colors are stronger underneath the mat. There's all kinds of things you'll be able to discover, which will affect the price of the work of art. So first of all, ask questions. If the auction house refuses to open the frame or refuses to address specific condition issues, then I encourage you not to bid. These auction houses are in the business of encouraging people to bid on their items. The more the client's request, the more that the client's requests are met, the chances of the particular work of art selling for higher. It's obvious. So either if they don't respond to your request, either they're hiding something. Of course, they might be really busy. It might be a print that's not much of a value to them. There's things that are selling for tens of thousands of dollars. That's all understandable. However, they should meet your requests, and if they don't, then bid accordingly or don't bid at all. So that's number one. Now, when buying artwork at an online auction, so there's a few online auctions. There's now more than a few, and it seems like every week there's another one that pops up, either on live auctioneers where there's different specialists that have gotten together and sell just exclusively Japanese prints, or websites dedicated to just auctioning off Japanese prints. Now these businesses are used to getting these kind of questions. And so, yeah, if you ask a question about the condition of a print, you should be able to get a very detailed answer, especially for an auction that deals in thousands of prints per year. That's what they do. They can tell you, is this print backed? Has this print received, does it look like it's been conserved? Are there tape stains on the versa? There's all these questions that can be answered. And so, I want to warn all of you, because the pitfalls here are that auction houses are also a very good source for, let me just say it, unscrupulous practices by some dealers and auction houses. And I'll just say this, sometimes, a dealer could buy a print and do a substantial amount of conservation to it, which I don't recommend. I do very little conservation on my prints. But then they send it off to an auction. And that way they don't have to stand behind the work of art. They're just putting it out in the open market. And the conservation that they've done, and particularly in painting, which is adding color back to a print or a painting or changing it in a way that it never was to begin with, is unethical, and it happens all the time. I see it happening all the time. Oh, okay. Sorry, my connection went away for a moment. So basically, you have to be careful. You have to be careful because you don't want to buy a print that's been worked on quite a bit, has been in-painted, or you're getting something that you thought, like an earlier impression, let's say, for example, of a Hiroshige with certain colorations that are attributed to a very early printing, but then you get a later printing with added color. That happens. And I'll just say this. during Frank Lloyd Wright's time, he was a serious collector, but he was also a dealer of Japanese prints. And what people don't know is actually he was kind of shady, and he routinely added pigments to his woodblock prints to make them look earlier and fresher. So this is not something that is new. It's not something that's new to the internet. It's been going on for quite some time. So collectors need to be aware when buying at auction. There are so many things that you need to be aware of. So those are just a few. The other instances are, where I'll say one other thing which I find interesting. Generally speaking, Japanese prints aren't actually rare, though they might be 100+ years old. You go to Japan. I mean, I go to Japan regularly, and there are some people I know that go there and buy prints by the foot. 2 or 3 feet worth of prints. I'm not kidding. And they put them in a box, ship them back to the U.S., and sell them individually. And so prints aren't rare. What makes them rare, and what makes them significant, obviously, is the artist, the impression, how early it is, and the condition, and just general, prints that you come across in the marketplace. You see those all the time. They were produced by the tens of thousands in Japan when they were, originally done. And you can find them. If you go to Japan, you could go to little shops and you can buy, I'm going to show a Hiroshige print today, so I'm just going to use him for example. You could find hundreds of Hiroshige prints under $100. And what's their true worth? Well, who's to say? It's what the market dictates, and if someone puts a print up on an auction or on eBay or something and it sells for $400, I guess it's worth $400. But that particular collector that spent $400 is probably not going to get back his or her own investment later on. The way you do that is buying the absolute best. The best ensures that your investment will be safe, and also, I mean, historically speaking, if you buy something that's early and in great condition, it retains the historical importance of it, the artistry, the original quality that the artist had in mind. All of those things are intact. When you're buying prints just on the open market on eBay or on online auctions, you never know what you're getting. And at the end of the day, I mean, it's fun, and I encourage people to follow their passion, but I also want to encourage all of you to temper your enthusiasm with, patience and with education. I always tell collectors, instead of buying artwork, you should buy books first, and become familiar with the designs you're interested in. The internet is full now of images from different collections, different museums that will help you, become familiar with these designs. You don't have to invest thousands of dollars in art books. You could go online and look at this stuff for free. And then one last thing I want to say about images online or even museums. A lot of collectors say, well, I have this one print, and the print is trimmed, or the print is, there's stains, but that's okay, because the so-and-so museum, or even the Met or whatever, the Art Institute or whatever, has this print, and mine's even in better shape than the one that they have. All right, well, let me just say this. Just because a print is in a museum doesn't mean anything. Museums acquire artwork in very different ways. Sometimes they go out and buy individual works of art. When they do that, of course they pick out the best pieces available. And of course they pick out the most significant works or particular examples of that design. But sometimes they get a donation of 1,000 prints. And the collector specifies that they all must be acquired and also taken care of. So maybe that collection of 1,000 prints had maybe 400 amazing pieces. Great. But the rest are not very good, and some of them might be, just crap, basically. So just because the museum has it doesn't mean anything. The other thing is there are some examples, I will say, that are unique. That there's one surviving Haranobu design, that happens to be at the MFA, and it's backed or it's toned and there's staining and the colors are gone, but it exists. Well, great, then that's fine. And the way that you should buy artwork is about, first of all, what work of art you're interested in is by the artist, by the design, and by the condition. And if it's a unique work, well, of course you could, excuse the condition issues. But by and large, you're not going to be buying things that are unique if you're interested in Japanese prints. So that's what makes Japanese print collecting fun, because you always have choice. And despite the fact what either dealers or what online auctions say, prints aren't that rare. The best works in the best condition are, but if it's a print that's has some fading, there's toning, some foxing, a matte line, you can always find another one. So that's also why you'll never really be able to achieve great results when you resell these works. If you buy stuff that's the condition is kind of mediocre, you might be able to recover your investment. You might not. That's because there's other prints out there that other people might be interested in buying. There's countless of prints out there that anyone can decide to buy. So I'm just throwing that out there. So those are some issues with collecting that I think people should really consider. Now, another question I received, and then we'll get to looking at some artwork, is about how to frame prints. And generally speaking, I don't frame my own artwork. My collection is housed in archival folders and in boxes and in storage, and I pull things out pretty often to look at them, but I don't really have my collection up on my wall. I mean, I have paintings up, which is entirely different story. But for prints, you want to be careful. Now, I understand collectors want to frame their artwork. Great. We live in a time when you can do that. 30 years ago, even 20 years ago, there was a lot of danger that prints could experience, or there was danger of them being damaged. Number one, the framers didn't know what they were doing. So, they would trim the margins to fit mats. Oh God, there's so many things that I've seen over the years. Or use Scotch tape across the margins to attach the prints onto the mat. That doesn't happen now. But you want to make sure your framer uses all our archival material. That's number one, and they all do now. But two, you want to make sure that the way that you frame it will preserve the artwork for as long as possible. So I would use UV museum glass, and they have some really great glass now that it's a kind of a plexi, actually. It's not glass, that is anti-reflective, so you could take pictures. When you walk by, you look at your work on the wall, and there's not a lot of glare and reflection from nearby lights. That's great. It's also protected by the UV plexi that they're using, so the colors will be as strong as when you bought them. The other thing I recommend to collectors is to add a UV shield on your windows. You can buy that at any hardware store that sells, that like True Value, Ace, Home Depot, whatever. They have these, and you could just attach them to the windows with some soapy water, and you could just kind of iron out the little lines or bubbles, and they dry, and you don't really see any streaks, and it protects your furniture, your rugs, including your artwork from fading. So there's that. And I recommend changing the plexi of your frames every 10 years. Partly because of the chemicals and whatever they use might degrade over time, and also because the technology might advance. In every 10 years, I would say they have a better way of doing the glass. So I would swap those out. So I would put the date of the framing or the date of the glass on the back of the frame, and 10 years later, you could swap it out for something better. And lastly, you want to make sure that your prints, I have a lot of collectors that like to frame their prints where the print is floating. Great, great. They look great, and you could see the entire margins of the print. That's fantastic. But I would recommend make sure that there's enough room in the frame so that the prints are on something that's archival, like a background mat, because the glass should never, never touch the prints. And the reason for that is that the glass, if the print is directly onto the glass or nearby, quite close, it will create condensation over time, especially if you're cooking or whatever happens in your apartment or in your home. And so, you don't want the buildup of moisture on the surface of the paper, because that will encourage mold to grow. So you don't want to do that. And doing that and just framing them in an archival standard way of doing things will ensure that your prints, outlive you and many other generations after you. So, I just said a bunch of stuff. I hope that was useful. And, feel free to keep asking these great questions. You could private message me, ask me questions, and I'll address the questions on my next video. So now, moving from these tips, I'm going to stay on this subject of tips but as we look at the artwork, you'll see what I'm kind of connecting both. But basically what I want to say is that if you're buying something, you want to buy something as early as a print is printed over dozens of years, if not, in some cases over 100 years. There's some blocks that still exist for some prints that are Edo period. And so you want to buy a print that is as close to the earliest printing, to the earliest part of its production. So if a print was done in 1854, you want to buy an impression that is as close to 1854 as possible. If you buy one from 1890 or 1900, it's going to look different from the 1854 version. And it's going to look different in ways because the blocks wear down, different publishers buy the blocks and reissue the print with different changes. And so the longer the longer the printing process goes, the print changes and the integrity of the design, it's not as crisp. The colors are changed to mask the wear of the blocks. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So I recommend, generally speaking, buy as early as possible. That also will ensure that your investment pays you out at the end. First early printings are always going to sell. Even in today's market, people are always looking to buy something that's early. And you'll see why. We'll go to the table. Here, why don't we do this? Without further ado, let's go to the table and have a look at something. So, dovetailing to what I was just saying, I pulled out a print by Hiroshige. This is a print he produced in 1858 for his 100 Famous Views of Edo. It was a series that he produced actually at the end of his life. So 100 Famous Views of Edo. So I just want to kind of zoom in. I'm going to try not to move my camera so much so you could kind of see the image. So this is one of the top designs from the series. Though the series title suggests there's 100 designs, there's more than 100. And Hiroshige actually died before the series was completed. So his adopted son, Hiroshige II, finished the series, and he had contributed some designs, and some of which, a few of them are really fantastic. And so in this particular design, you see this really large bridge, and you see all these people walking on it. There's these boats on the water. And then there's this fireworks, here in the background they're erupting, and Hiroshige was very skillful at adding the cartouche. This gives you the series and then the particularly title of this impression or of this design, and then we have the fireworks around the cartouches. And here we have this trail here that of a firework that went up into the sky, is coming down, and you imagine it's going to burst. And this particular impression is really early. I don't think it's the first state, meaning it's the very first printing off the blocks, but it's quite early. I would say it's a close second state, or very early from the printing. I won't give you a number because that's really impossible, but there are some telltale signs that will indicate this. First of all, the most pronounced thing that I think I love the most about this print is this wood grain. And the printers selected a particular wood grain plank of wood that had this feature so they could print the background sky so that wood grain would be added to the print. Now, when Hiroshige designed this design, he didn't actually pencil out a wood grain in the background. That was something that was selected by the publisher and the printer in collaboration with Hiroshige, but this was added by the original printer and publisher. So you get this really wonderful atmospheric quality. And another interesting part about this impression is these little areas, these two dots. That's a printing, I mean, if I could call it a flaw, but it's a printing effect from the earliest printings from this wood grain. And on later impressions, you don't see it because this would have been filled in by the pigment over time. And so when you printed that plank of wood, you would not get these two dots. And of course, the wood grain will start disappearing on later impressions. And later impressions were printed with different colors to mask these issues. So on the later impressions, you get a much darker sky that masks the loss of the wood grain. Now, I hear that the very first state of this design actually has a darker sky. And this area is illuminated with kind of more of a halo. Although I accept that, I'm still on the fence about what the first state looks like. I'm more in line that it should look closer to this than the other version, but of course, with connoisseurship, it's really sometimes a guessing game. So, and I'll show you different impressions from different books on how this design evolved over time. But the other really nice thing about this impression is that the color of the cartouche, you could see, it's a nice, fire engine red. You see these Hiroshige prints on the marketplace, and the cartouches are orange. And that's because this red fades to an orange over time. So, when you're buying these prints, you want to make sure that the red, because it's always red, this is the Hiroshige red. It's kind of a fire engine red color. If you see it closer to orange, you know that there's some fading. Now, the other really interesting thing, sorry, I keep moving this phone so much. The other interesting thing is here at the bottom, you have this dark blue that sort of there's a gradual gradation to light. That's a beautiful bokashi. That's what that word means, a gradation of dark to light or light to dark. And here, the dark is interesting because this suggests the light of the fireworks illuminating this portion of the body of water. It's a much lighter, reflective quality in the water. And here, in the distance, as we move away from the fireworks, the water is much darker. I think that's really neat. The other thing I'm going to try to show, which you may not be able to see, is that there's this silver mica. Mica is it's a mineral that's used in printmaking in Japanese prints to add an extra embellishment. And usually mica also suggests an earlier deluxe printing. And here you see mica shimmering very lightly. It's not something that's caked on. It's something that's really light, and these prints were meant to be enjoyed up close in a personal way, like, out in an album, or the way that we're looking at this print now, not in a frame. And so there's these wonderful little embellishments that are added to prints that enhance that personal, contact when you look at a print. My apologies, my connection is going in and out. So if I fuzz out, I promise I'll be back. So, but anyways, I was saying this particular print has a lot of mica in it, and in connection with the wood grain, creates a really wonderful effect. So I'm going to zoom in so you could see the print up close. All right, now I'm going to show you the verso. This is the back of the print, and you could see sometimes woodblock prints, Japanese prints, are backed. And that means they're backed for a couple reasons. Sometimes, and I would say sometimes, meaning the vast majority of times, a print is backed because a print was added to an album. And so in this particular case, I have my book here. There's the series of 100. Well, there are albums that have all 100. I think there's 10 or 14 designs in an album, and they were bound in this album right around the time they were published. So the album backing is original, and basically what would happen is they would take the print. They would trim the margins to fit the album. Usually the albums were big enough to have most of the margins, and then they were pasted onto the album itself. And later, when these albums were sold to Westerners, or even in Japan, even now I see this, they tear the prints out from albums, and you see them now with a thick backing. And the backing's usually kind of a yellowish brown color. And again, that's original. The backing is benign. It's not affecting the print. It was done with rice paste, the adhesive. So it's archival. And, if you wanted the backing removed, any good conservator can remove the backing to reveal the original reverse, so you could see the bleed through of the print into the paper. And for some collectors, that's important. And the earliest impressions, particularly of these Hiroshige prints, I see them usually not backed, and the reason why is that they were sold individually when they were being printed, when they were really early, fresh off the blocks. And then after the entire series was complete, the publisher offered an entire bound album with all of the prints in it. Now, usually, in this case, bound albums were posthumous because Hiroshige died before the completion of the entire sets, if that means anything. But in this case, this is a very early impression, and it was never bound in an album, which is kind of nice. And so I want to show this impression and compare it to the Brooklyn Museum of Art's impression. This book, by the way, highly recommend it. Hiroshige 100 Famous Views of Edo. The book, it came out. When it came out, it was $75. You might be able to find it for that, maybe a little less in various states of condition. Pristine books like this one probably will sell for double, maybe. But the point is, an investment of $100, $150 is vital to have this book if you're interested in collecting this series. First of all, the information contained in the book is worth 3 times what you would pay. And then you have basically images that are they're life size. Here, I'll put the print right on. Sorry, went away for a moment. So yeah, the print right directly on the book, you could see that it's basically life size. So that's a great tool to have. A book that could show you the exact print the way that it looks like in real life. I mean, that's fantastic. Now, in this particular impression, some collectors and connoisseurs and curators have suggested that this is the first state, or this is a very early printing. I have not seen this particular impression in person, so I can't say one way or the other whether that's true. But the way that it's photographed in this book, I have my doubts. And the wood grain is kind of missing, and there's some things that tell me that it may not be, but it's still very, very early, and I may be splitting hairs here. But the point is, you could see the differences between this print and this print. It's much, much darker. You lose the atmospheric quality of the sky, but there's really powerful light from the fireworks behind the cartouches, which is kind of nice. But it's interesting. In between the two, I actually prefer that one. So, whatever that may mean. And, I have here, I set up like my little library here, where there's these two reference books, and I'll just show the cover of this one. Sorry, my phone was acting up. I got to figure out how to do this a better, more efficient way. But this here, I'm going to move this away from the light. But the point is, this impression looks a bit similar to mine. And again, you could see here the two kind of dots, the 2 spots that are here. I'm going to try to move it this way. That works. You see the 2 spots in and out of the trail of the fireworks. You see the wood grain, and and this print looks like it's in great shape, though in my opinion it's a little faded. At least maybe what I think is that the colors in the book, the way that they've represented, it's not as red as it could be. So it might be a little faded, or just the other problem with having these books is that the production of the books, the colors aren't as great. So you can't tell whether it's this red. You want to see this red. It might be in person. You just can't tell from the book. But it's kind of interesting to see this impression and how close it looks to this one. Now, the other version I pulled out to show you is a very late impression. You could see here the cartouche is not red. It's an orangey color that it has lost, I would say about 70% of this color. And it's even the orange is disappearing. And here in the background, it's very, very dark, very, very dark. And you could see the strip of really dark, almost black, that you see in this impression, that you see in this impression. You don't see it here because most of it is black. But the background is this like navy blue. And when you look at it, and I've seen impressions like this in person, it's just, I mean, I hate to say it, it's kind of lifeless. I've seen really late impressions of this design where the blue is just caked on, and it's really not doing much other than representing a very dark night sky. And you lose the detail of the town here, of Edo, Tokyo now, but Edo back then. And then you do see the water being a little lighter, as you see it here and here. But again, I want to point out, you could see how really well articulated the houses are right on the shore. You could see that here as well. That, and here, that's gone. Now, if you really wanted this design and you could only afford a few $100s, you could get something like this for under $500. You know, I've seen them sell for $200 to $300 when they're really bad shape. You know, and of course they go up from here. But if you had the resources to spend on a earlier impression, it's better to wait and find something that is really astounding and just this gives you a sense of what the artist wanted to produce originally. So I'm gonna go over each image so you could see the differences. We'll start with the print, and I'll move on to the books one last time. The other thing I didn't mention in this impression, you see these circular sort of these circular sort of forms in the design, and that's actually from the printing process. There's a circular sort of tool, a baran, or baron, depends on who you ask, but you use this to print the print. You put the piece of paper against the wood and you sort of rub it onto the block, and you get these lines. I actually love seeing stuff like this. It shows you the hand of the artisan at work here. Here on this print, because it's in a book, it's kind of hard to tell. You're not going to be able to see those things, and you know, books won't be able to show you everything. But I bet if you go online to the Brooklyn Museum's website, you'll be able to see this print in a much better detail, because those photos are that are online are much better than the photos that are used to print a book. And then, of course, the last version. So I want to thank all of you for joining me on Woodblock Wednesday. I hope some of the information I shared at the beginning of the video is helpful. For all of you who joined me a little later, and I want to thank all of you, see all these names. I want to say hello to everyone who's watching live. You know, feel free to go back, watch a little bit of the beginning that you may have missed. I archive these videos on my website. It's collectingjapaneseprints.com. And for now, I've stopped selling artwork on my site during the, you know, now that we're sort of just sheltering in place. This is not a time, in my opinion, for commerce. I think it's sort of a time for us to stay safe, stay at home, and I encourage all of you not to go out there and just enjoy my videos, enjoy your artwork, and feel free to send me emails with questions. I love questions, and if they work out, I'll even feature the questions in my next video. So thanks again for joining me. I will see you next week for Woodblock Wednesday. Bye.